Billionaire catches black female driver dancing with her paralyzed son. What happened next shocked everyone. "Stop that immediately," Cassandra Stone's voice echoed through the mansion like a gunshot. She stood at the entrance to the living room, her hands clenched into fists, watching a scene that made her blood run cold. Her 9-year-old son, Arthur, was in his customized wheelchair in the center of the room, a genuine smile gracing his face for the first time in months. Next to him, Clara Vancroft, the driver Cassandra had hired just 3 weeks ago, swayed gently to a jazz melody playing softly from her old flip phone. The 30-year-old black woman held the boy's hand delicately, spinning slowly around the chair while Arthur clapped his hands with a joy Cassandra hadn't witnessed since the accident. "What in God's name do you think you're doing with my son?" Cassandra lunged toward Clara, who immediately stopped dancing and released Arthur's hand. The boy's smile vanished instantly, replaced by an expression of confusion and fear. Clara remained calm, her hands raised in a peaceful gesture. "Mrs. Stone, I can explain." "Explain?" Cassandra interrupted, her voice laced with indignation. "You were hired to drive, not to do whatever this is." She gestured furiously toward the phone that was still playing music. "Turn that thing off now!" Arthur began to whimper silently, and Clara quickly grabbed the phone to pause the music. The silence that followed was suffocating. Cassandra looked at her son, then at Clara, and something in her chest tightened in a way she couldn't name. "Mommy, please," Arthur whispered, his voice small and broken. "Clara was just teaching me to dance like the other kids." "You can't dance," Cassandra exploded, the words tumbling out before she could control them. "You're in a wheelchair, Arthur." "The sooner you accept that, the better." Clara's face twitched slightly, but she remained silent. There was something in her eyes, not anger, not fear, but a deep understanding that Cassandra couldn't quite place. It was as if the driver knew exactly the kind of pain that made her react that way. "Mrs. Stone," Clara said calmly, her voice carrying a soft, almost melodic accent that Cassandra had never noticed before. "May I speak with you privately?" "There's nothing to discuss," Cassandra replied curtly. "Get your things." "You're fired," Clara nodded slowly, but before turning to leave, she looked at Arthur one last time. "Remember what we talked about with the constellations, little star. Some shine differently, but they still light up the sky." As Clara walked toward the door, Cassandra noticed something that made her uneasy. The woman didn't seem surprised or desperate, as she would have expected from someone who had just lost their job. There was a serenity in her movements, as if she knew something Cassandra didn't. Arthur continued crying, and Cassandra knelt beside his chair, trying to comfort him, but her words sounded empty even to her own ears. "Why did you send her away?" Arthur asked between sobs. "She made me feel normal again." Cassandra didn't know how to respond. For 6 months, since the tragic car accident that left Arthur paralyzed from the waist down, she had hired the best physical therapists, child psychologists, and specialists money could buy in their exclusive neighborhood of Knightsbridge, London. None of them had been able to elicit a genuine smile from her son until Clara showed up. As she watched Arthur wipe his tears with the back of his hand, Cassandra wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. There was something about that driver that didn't fit, something that set off alarm bells in her analytical mind, but not the kind she would have expected. If this story of pride and unexpected connections is touching your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel because what Cassandra was about to discover about Clara would change not only her perspective on the driver, but on herself in a way she never thought possible. 3 days had passed since the dismissal, and the Stone mansion seemed to have returned to its quiet, cold routine. Cassandra threw herself into her work at her investment firm, convincing herself that she had made the right decision. After all, she couldn't allow strangers to take advantage of her son's vulnerability. But Arthur was not cooperating with her plan for normality. The boy refused to leave his room, pushed away his meals, and cried whenever he heard the sound of cars in the driveway, hoping it was Clara returning. The physical therapists hired by Cassandra reported total resistance. "He simply refused to participate in any activity," one reported, visibly frustrated. "Mommy?" Why isn't Clara coming back? Arthur asked for the 10th time that morning, his tears leaving damp stains on his pillowcase. We've already talked about this, sweetheart. She wasn't right for the job here, Cassandra replied, adjusting her silk scarf in front of the antique mirror. A crucial meeting with Japanese tech investors couldn't be postponed, even with the drama at home. But she understood me, Arthur murmured, turning his face to the wall. Meanwhile, on the other side of London, in a modest apartment in Peckham, Clara Vancroft was sitting at her small kitchen table, calmly typing on a state-of-the-art laptop that definitely didn't match the humble surroundings. The screen showed a series of emails in English, Mandarin, and German correspondence that a simple driver should never be able to maintain. Her phone rang. Dr. Vancroft. The voice on the other end spoke in Mandarin. The University of Cambridge would like to confirm your availability for the lecture on sensory integration and kinetic therapy next week. I need to postpone it for a few days. Clara replied in the same language, her eyes never leaving the discreet photo she had taken of Arthur during one of their dance sessions. I have a special case that requires my full attention. Cassandra had never bothered to properly investigate Clara Vancroft's background. Had she done so, she would have discovered that the black woman she had hired as her driver held a PhD in neuropediatrics from the University of Cambridge, specialized in music and movement therapy for children with neurological trauma, and had abandoned a promising academic career and research fellowship after a deeply personal tragedy. But there was something else, something that even the most thorough investigation would not reveal. Clara had known the Stone family for much longer than Cassandra had imagined. As Cassandra prepared for another day of trying to ignore her son's sobs, her personal assistant, Mr. Finch, entered the office with a worried expression. Mrs. Stone, I need to report something strange, Mr. Finch said, consulting his tablet. The driver you fired. He paused. She didn't try to contest the dismissal. She didn't ask for references. She didn't seem desperate at all. Cassandra frowned. In fact, Clara's calm reaction had bothered her from the start. So what? Maybe she already had another job lined up. It's just that I did some checking, ma'am. I found out that she has advanced academic training. She speaks 5 languages, and Mr. Finch hesitated. There are records of her working with special needs children in leading European hospitals, including a prestigious clinic in Zurich. Cassandra's stomach tightened slightly. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because you didn't ask for a full background check, Mrs. Stone. You said you just needed someone to drive and handle light household duties. Cassandra vaguely remembered the job interview. Clara had been recommended by the employment agency as highly qualified and experienced with families. She had assumed that referred only to experience as a driver. That afternoon, Cassandra returned home early and found Arthur exactly as she had left him, motionless on the bed, staring out the window. But this time, he was whispering something. "Who are you talking to, sweetheart?" she asked, approaching him. "The constellations," Arthur replied without turning around. "Clara taught me that some shine differently, but they still light up the sky, like me." Cassandra felt a tightness in her chest. Those were the last words Clara had said to Arthur before leaving. Later, after Arthur had fallen asleep, Cassandra found herself walking to the garage where she used to find Clara meticulously cleaning the car and humming softly. The space was now empty and silent, but something caught her attention. On the dashboard of the car, Clara had left a small, neatly bound journal. Cassandra opened it, expecting to find personal notes. Instead, she found published medical articles on childhood paralysis, innovative music therapy techniques, and a series of handwritten notes meticulously detailing A.S. Arthur Stone's initials. The notes were detailed, professional, and revealed a knowledge of Arthur's condition that went far beyond what any driver should possess. There were exercise diagrams, adapted musical progressions, and a comprehensive treatment plan that stretched out over months. At the bottom of the journal, Cassandra found a faded photograph. A young black woman in a white lab coat standing next to a smiling white man in a hospital bed, both looking warmly at the camera. The man had the same kind, intelligent eyes as Arthur's father, Robert. It was Robert. the husband who had died in the same accident that left Arthur paralyzed. The photo was dated 7 years ago in a hospital in Geneva. On the back, a note in elegant German: Doctor Clara Vancroft, specialist in pediatric neurological trauma. Treatment of Robert Stone. Cassandra dropped the photo, her hands shaking. Clara wasn't just a skilled driver who had happened to appear in her life. She had known Robert. She had treated her husband. And now, 7 years later, she had mysteriously turned up to work in her house just when Arthur needed help the most. Every new humiliation Cassandra had inflicted on Clara, every harsh word, every look of contempt, now took on a completely different weight. The woman she had fired so cruelly was not an opportunist trying to take advantage of a vulnerable child. She was possibly the only person in the world who truly knew how to help Arthur, and Cassandra had just sent her away. The next morning, Cassandra couldn't concentrate on any of her meetings. The photo of Robert with Clara hammered in her mind like an unanswered question. How was it possible that fate had brought her husband's doctor to work as a driver in her home just when Arthur needed him most? It couldn't be a coincidence. Cassandra canceled all her appointments and instructed Mr. Finch to hire a private investigation agency immediately. I want everything on Clara Vancroft. Every document, every job, every breath she's taken in the last 15 years. Ma'am, may I ask why this is so urgent? Mr. Finch asked, adjusting his glasses nervously. I found out that our former driver is not who we thought she was, Cassandra replied, still holding the photo. And I need to know exactly who I've been dealing with. Meanwhile, Arthur had taken a turn for the worse. He refused to eat, wouldn't talk to anyone, and had developed a low fever that the doctors couldn't explain. The physical therapist reported that the boy had simply closed his eyes during the entire session, as if he had given up completely. It's as if he's lost the will to live, murmured Dr. Anya Sharma, the family pediatrician, after examining Arthur. Sometimes children who have suffered trauma develop very specific emotional attachments. When those connections are abruptly severed, it can be devastating. Are you suggesting that my son is sick because I fired a driver? Cassandra interrupted, her voice heavy with disbelief and irritation. I'm suggesting that you may have underestimated the importance of this person in his recovery, Dr. Sharma countered gently. That afternoon, the agency's report arrived via encrypted email. Cassandra locked herself in her office and began to read, her certainties crumbling page by page. Clara Vancroft had graduated from the University of Cape Town with a degree in medicine, specialized in pediatric neurology in Switzerland, and for 7 years had worked at the Klinik Herslanden in Zurich, the very hospital where Robert had been treated during a research stint. But there was more, much more. Clara had lost her own son in a tragic swimming accident 5 years ago. Leo Vancroft, age 7, had drowned in circumstances that left Clara heartbroken and seeking a new path. After the tragedy, Clara abandoned traditional hospital medicine and began developing unconventional techniques of therapy through movement and music for traumatized children, focusing on the joy of recovery. The report included scientific articles published by Clara, citations in international medical journals, and something that made Cassandra's blood run cold: an interview she had given to a Swiss newspaper 3 years earlier, in which Clara mentioned her intention to find other children like Leo and offer them a second chance at joy. Cassandra picked up the phone and dialed Clara's number. The phone rang several times before a calm voice answered. I know you found out who I am, Clara said without even waiting for a greeting. Why didn't you tell me from the beginning? Cassandra asked, her voice betraying a mixture of anger and confusion. Because women like you don't hire ex-doctors to drive cars, Mrs. Stone. You hire chauffeurs. And Arthur needed someone who could be around him without raising suspicion or expectations. Suspicions? What kind of game are you playing with my family? Clara sighed deeply on the other end of the line. Mrs. Stone, your husband Robert came to me 7 months before the accident. He was researching alternative treatments for children with potential neurological issues because Because doctors had already diagnosed a complex condition during your pregnancy that could affect Arthur in the future. Cassandra felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. That's impossible. Arthur was born perfectly healthy. He was, Mrs. Stone. But Robert knew there was a genetic predisposition. He was preparing a preventive treatment plan in case something happened. He asked me to promise that if Arthur ever needed it, I would do everything in my power to help him, even if it meant stepping outside the traditional medical path. Clara's words echoed in the silent office like a confession that rewrote the entire history Cassandra thought she knew. Robert had kept a medical secret from her. He had prepared for a tragedy that had not yet happened. "You're lying," Cassandra muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's in his will, Mrs. Stone, in the part your lawyers probably classified as the musings of an overly anxious new father." Robert left specific instructions on how Arthur should be treated in the event of paralysis or severe trauma. Cassandra quickly opened the digital files of Robert's will on her computer. There, on page 12, a section she had completely overlooked. "In the event of neurological trauma or paralysis involving our son Arthur, I strongly recommend contacting Doctor Clara Vancroft, a specialist in unconventional therapy. Her methods may seem unorthodox, but they work where traditional medicine fails." "My God," Cassandra whispered, dropping the phone. Mr. Finch appeared at the door at that moment, carrying a folder of documents. "Ma'am, there's something else you need to see. I found records of payments your husband made to a clinic in Zurich. Monthly payments that continued to be automatically debited from a joint account until last month." Cassandra took the documents with trembling hands. Robert had been paying for a children's rehabilitation clinic all these years, a clinic where Clara worked as a consultant. "She's been watching us," Cassandra muttered. "Waiting." "Not watching, ma'am," Mr. Finch corrected gently. "Waiting to be needed." At that moment, Cassandra realized the extent of her arrogance. She had humiliatingly fired the only woman in the world her husband had specifically chosen to take care of Arthur. She had treated as an opportunist the doctor who had abandoned a brilliant career to fulfill a promise made to a dead man. Worse, she had done so in front of Arthur, shattering the only genuine connection the boy had formed since the accident. Cassandra called Clara again. "I need you to come back." "That's not how it works," Clara replied calmly. "I'm not an employee you can fire and rehire at your convenience. I'm a doctor who made a promise." "Then what do you want from me?" "I want you to stop trying to control your son's healing and start participating in it. I want you to admit that you don't know what's best for Arthur. And I want you to apologize, not to me, but to him." Cassandra swallowed her pride like a bitter pill. "And if I do that, then maybe Arthur still has a chance at happiness." As Cassandra processed the magnitude of her mistakes, a notification popped up on her phone. A text message from an unknown number. "Arthur asked me to send this to you." It was a 3-minute video. In the video, Arthur appeared sitting in his wheelchair in what looked like a therapy room, smiling as he moved his arms in sync with soft, rhythmic music. His legs, though immobile, swayed slightly to the rhythm. Clara appeared briefly in the corner of the screen, guiding his movements with infinite patience and a gentle smile. The message accompanying the video was devastating in its simplicity. "He recorded this last week when he still believed that you loved him more than your own pride." Cassandra realized at that moment that she had lost much more than an employee. She had lost her own son's trust. And now, for the first time in years, she wasn't sure she could ever regain what she had destroyed with her arrogance and prejudice. But as she watched the video for the 5th time in a row, a different determination began to grow in her chest. Not the determination to control, but the humility to learn. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to become the mother Arthur deserved to have. Across town, Clara hung up the phone and looked at the framed photo on her desk. Leo, her son, smiling brightly on a swing shortly before the accident. "One more, my little one," she whispered. "We'll save one more." Cassandra drove to Clara's apartment in Peckham unannounced, the investigation report folded in her trembling hand. She found her sitting on the small balcony reading a book in German, as if she had been expecting this visit. "You planned all of this," Cassandra said bluntly, climbing the steps leading up to the small apartment. "From day one." Clara calmly closed the book and gestured to the only other chair beside her. "Sit down, Mrs. Stone. It's time we talked like two women who care deeply about the same child." "No!" Cassandra exploded. "You lied about who you were. You manipulated my family. You used my husband's memory to fulfill a promise I made to him," Clara interrupted, her voice firm. "A promise you never knew he asked me to make." Cassandra threw the report on the small table between them. "I know everything about Leo, your son. About how you abandoned traditional medicine after he died. About how you've been using other children to try to make up for your own loss." Clara's face twitched slightly, but she didn't deny it. "You're right about one thing, Mrs. Stone. Every child I help brings Leo back for a few moments. But if you think that diminishes my love for Arthur, you're very much mistaken." "How dare you?" Cassandra began. But Clara interrupted her again. "Your husband, Robert, came to me because he knew you would never accept unconventional methods. Robert knew your need to control everything, to have scientific answers to emotional problems. He asked me to promise that if anything happened to Arthur, I would find a way to be there, even if it meant lying about who I really was." Clara picked up a yellowed, slightly crumpled letter from the table. "Robert wrote this for you, but he asked me to give it to you only when the time came, when Arthur truly needed me and you were standing in the way." Cassandra immediately recognized her husband's strong, decisive handwriting. With trembling hands, she opened the letter and read aloud. "Cassandra, if Clara is giving you this letter, it means that our son needs her and you are fighting it. Please, my love, stop trying to fix Arthur and start loving him for who he is. Let Clara help him. She lost her own child, but she can save ours. Trust her, as I did." Tears began to roll down Cassandra's cheeks. "Why didn't you tell me this from the beginning?" "Because you weren't ready to hear it. You needed to see Arthur smile again first, to understand that not everything can be controlled or bought, and that sometimes the greatest healing comes from the most unexpected places." At that moment, Cassandra's phone rang. It was Brenda, the housekeeper, and her voice was filled with panic. "Mrs. Stone, you need to come home immediately. Arthur, he's out of bed. He's trying to crawl on his own and refuses to stop until Clara returns." Cassandra felt her world collapse for the second time that month. "I'm going home," she said to Clara, her voice cracking. "You're coming with me." "Not as your employee," Clara replied firmly. "As your son's doctor, as the woman your husband chose to take care of him, and as someone who will no longer accept being treated as inferior for trying to save your family." On the way back to Knightsbridge, Cassandra finally asked the question that had been hammering in her head. "What do you really want from me, Clara?" "I want you to stop seeing my race before you see my competence. I want you to stop thinking that because I am a black woman and I was driving your car, I can't be qualified to take care of your son. And I want you to admit that you spent 6 months paying the best specialists in the world, but you fired the only one who truly worked because she didn't look like what you expected a doctor to look like." Clara's words cut deeper than any investigation report. Cassandra realized that she had judged Clara not only as an employee, but had carried all the deep-seated prejudices she didn't even know she had. When they arrived at the mansion, they found Arthur in the hallway, clinging to his wheelchair, but with his feet on the floor, trying desperately to take small, dragging steps. Tears streamed down his face, but he didn't stop. "Arthur!" Cassandra ran toward him, but he raised a trembling hand. "No, Mommy. I have to show Clara that I did it. I have to show her that I didn't give up." Clara approached slowly and knelt down to the boy's height. "I always knew you could do it, little star. But you don't have to hurt yourself to prove it to me. Will you come back?" Arthur asked, his voice small and full of hope. Clara looked at Cassandra, who finally understood that this wasn't about hiring an employee. It was about accepting help. It was about swallowing her pride. It was about admitting that she had judged an extraordinary woman by her most superficial characteristics. "Clara," Cassandra said, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to apologize for what I did. I don't know how to make up for my prejudice, my arrogance. But if there's still a chance, I'd like you to come back, not as a driver, as the doctor my husband chose, as the person who made my son smile again." Clara smiled for the first time since she had been fired. "Only if you promise me one thing, Mrs. Stone." "Anything," Cassandra whispered. "The next time I teach Arthur to dance, you'll dance with him too. Because he needs his mother, not just his doctor." And there, in the hallway of that Knightsbridge mansion that had been cold and silent for so long, the most beautiful of creations began. That of a family learning that love knows no prejudice, and that sometimes the most powerful medicine is simply accepting help from those who are willing to offer it, regardless of what they look like or where they come from. 2 years later, the Stone Mansion had been completely transformed. What began as Arthur's private therapy blossomed into the Constellation Project, a pioneering center for children with disabilities, created through a groundbreaking partnership between Cassandra Stone and Dr. Clara Vancroft. Arthur, now 11 years old, walked with crutches and occasionally took assisted steps, dancing regularly with infectious joy. His laughter, and the laughter of dozens of other children, echoed through the halls of the house that had been transformed into a beacon of hope. "Mom, today we're going to teach the new girl how to move to the music," Arthur announced as he entered Cassandra's now shared office, a vibrant space filled with artwork and musical instruments. "She's afraid to move from her chair, but I'll show her that dancing, even sitting down, is beautiful too." Cassandra smiled, remembering when she thought it was impossible for someone in a wheelchair to dance. Clara had become much more than a doctor. She was the sister Cassandra never knew she needed, a confidant and an equal. During crucial meetings with investors and philanthropic organizations, Cassandra made a point of telling their story. "I almost destroyed my son's only chance at happiness because I judged an extraordinary doctor by the color of her skin and her perceived social status. My prejudice almost cost Arthur his life, and me, my soul." Cassandra had lost some fair-weather friends from her elite London circle who could not accept her partnership with a black woman from a different background, but she gained a real family and a profound purpose in life. "I learned that prejudice is not just an injustice against others," she stated powerfully in a national television interview. "It's a prison we build for ourselves, isolating us from the very people who can enrich our lives. When I finally saw Clara for who she truly was, I didn't just save my son, I saved myself." The Constellation Project now served over 350 families a year, with a waiting list stretching months long. Clara published her unique therapeutic methodologies free of charge for doctors and therapists worldwide, revolutionizing approaches to childhood trauma recovery. Cassandra discovered that building lives and fostering joy was infinitely more rewarding than merely building fortunes. The mansion that had once been a silent, cold tomb now pulsed with music, laughter, and hope. Cassandra Stone proved that the best revenge against prejudice is to turn it into bridges to a better, more inclusive world. If this story has shown you how our judgments can blind us to the miracles right in front of us, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that human greatness has no color, no social class, and no limit.